And that brings us to the schematic plan. And this is what we've come up with as a way to respond to all the input and the comments. To present this, we'll kind of walk through it in zones, if you will. And what we have is the Roosevelt Edge, the Maple Leaf Terrace, the Sports Terrace, and the Family Terrace. This plan will probably, on the south side, look fairly familiar. And what we looked at was the park is arranged and organized fairly logically the way that it's used today. You have this separation of grade, they create these separation of rooms, this ability for people to use these independent spaces, and then linking together with pathways and things that might be missing. Of course, the biggest elements are up on the top. So kind of walking right in. So on the Roosevelt Edge, which we sort of define as this area, the busiest area, the most intense use. So what we have on this edge, of course, is the water tower, which anchors that northwest corner. And we have a couple of entry points shown off of Roosevelt. One at the north here, and one at the red arrow. And the idea, when you enter the park, you come across our main gathering space where we have a shelter and a structure. So the idea is, as you walk into it, you go through this compression, you walk through this area of what we're proposing to be a large stand of a variety of maple trees, and you move through that compression and then all into this openness. So you see how it opens up into the vistas across the park, and then you've got something like the shelter next to it. This is just a sort of conceptual sketch of what it would feel like. That's just our interpretation of a structure that represents some of the gabled ends, the wood structure, the kinds of materials we've seen around the neighborhood. So it's just a character sketch for that. On the Roosevelt Edge also, we have the idea of some multi-use courts in this area just adjacent. One of our thoughts of why this landed here, that little dot right there, and there's a corresponding one right there, are markers. And we thought that it'd be interesting to mark the four corners of the reservoir. I mean, it is a reservoir and it is part of the park and the history. So we looked at marking those corners. This is also another marker that we're required to put in. You see this sort of dashed line that moves all the way through. That is the 50-foot offset. We are required to mark that so that it's clear to anybody that comes into the park, whether you're a visitor or you're there to do maintenance, that you know that this is the line that you need permission to do any sort of work on the inside of this. Well, recall what I said about SPU being in favor of paving or synthetic surfaces. When we started to look at locating some of these elements, this is one thing that SPU embraces. They love to see things that are paved. The less growing things on there, the happier they are. So we thought this made a lot of sense that on this edge where we've got a lot of activity, why not include this ability to have this multi-use space along with this gathering space so your big events and everything can focus out onto the grand. Oh, are the sports courts lit?
And the answer is
no. 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 Can we hold the questions? Is that all right? Because we got a lot to get through. So the idea too of the events that are shown, we show a basketball court here, modified size, and these are based on pickleball courts. We're just showing some options that we'll continue to explore on what the preference is for what those will actually be. So, but that's just the idea, is to have this hard surface, this court area. This major path that you see come through here is fairly significant because this is a loop path that goes all the way around the park. I would put it probably in about the 3/4 mile range of a loop around the park, so it's substantial to be able to go all the way around the park, maybe the 1/2 to 3/4. So it's, and it also is a continuation of the SPU path, which we'll see in the next slide. Oh, and well, I guess right down in this area, this is a fairly steep slope down to the sidewalk from the park. This is probably, let's say, 15 to 20 feet of grade change. And we've actually created a terrace here. And the idea is a possible future element which with our budget, our constraints, the things we're dealing with, we aren't showing a skate park in that area, but that would be an area that we would suggest as a possible for a skate park. It's about a 3,000 to 4,000 square foot area, but it has a slope above where people can walk above and see what's happening, and the sidewalk below. So it's kind of a nice isolated terrace, kind of a teen space too, we thought, but we won't ever call it that because we know if we do, the teens will never go there. So we got to kind of keep it as a skate area or just even a grassy terrace. So moving on to the Maple Leaf Terrace. So this is going to be the majority of the park and the elements that are there. And I'll pause here just to point out that the loop path. So SPU is going to come in with their access on this side, and this is one of their structures that's fenced in on this side. It'll come in, and then they need to get around to this, and they need to get around to these 2 points. So of course, we want it to feel like it's a park path and not a driveway. So this is a 10-foot wide asphalt path, and it actually then loops the entire park. So that's our major loop of activity. It's the widest one. It's the primary circulation. And then we have a secondary circulation, which we actually sort of have these spiraling pieces that are just part of this whole idea of this waves and this concept of the softness of things. But the idea of having this central loop then that you can also walk. And this is probably, I'd say the area that you're looking at in the center here is the equivalent of a couple of soccer fields. So it could be a little less than a half a mile. Maybe it's between the quarter and a half mile. I don't know the exact distance, but give you a sense of scale of how big that is. But that's the next layer of circulation that we have. Also to point out, the one influence that the Commons Plan had. There was something good in all the plans, and the one thing the Commons Plan did suggest was connections through the park, 12th, that you can actually come through this walkway and connect all the way through to 12th, and 85th, that you can connect all the way through. We broke down that grid because, of course, that wasn't appreciated, being too rigid, too urban. And so what you actually see then is that you would come in and you'd access one of these paths and move around and find your way across. So it's not a direct route, but it's still there. Likewise with the 85th route, that you can come into the center and go around, or you could stay on the outer path. If as the budget allows with lighting, what I've just described would also be probably the location that we would actually see lighting would be on this primary route around the edges like this to get people through the park safely. So one of those items that's still kind of on the edge as to whether it's going to be included and whether we can afford it and how it actually works. But if we have lighting, that would be part of the concept. So the detail plan on this. So we've already hit the access points. So that's these number 3s that you see floating around here, and they're connected on the big path. Just a reminder, the rain garden that SPU has proposed is in this area, so that's something that's already happening. The existing trees on the south slope, so this whole area down here at the bottom of this image. The reservoir, there's one of the corner markers, and there's the other one, and the other two are just off of this slide, but that shows you the area that's included there. And then the 50-foot offset is just outside that, so it just sneaks along this path and across this northern edge. This path is actually the 50-foot edge, so it marks it for us that way, so you can kind of see what's happening there.